This freakish creature appeared on a California beach and left scientists completely baffled. The staff at the Coal Oil Point Reserve in California can't miss the 600-pound creature that's washed up from the Pacific Ocean. But while at first the team think that they know the species of the giant critter, a closer look sees them realize they've gotten things all wrong. And unsettlingly, the experts have no idea what this monstrous beast actually is. Considering how large the animal on the beach appeared to be, the Coal Point's experts quickly determined that they'd found an ocean sunfish. And the specs seemed to be right at first. For starters, the ocean sunfish is one of the weightiest species of bony fish on Earth, with some examples able to reach in excess of a whopping 2,200 pounds. The ocean sunfish can be so large, in fact, that its height may even match its length. These astonishing beasts therefore stand in stark contrast to the sleek, slim fish we tend to imagine darting through rivers and oceans. And while the size and thickness of adult sunfish's skin keeps them safe from many oceanic predators, they're nevertheless at risk for being eaten by sharks, orcas, and sea lions. Then there are those ocean sunfish that wash up on the shores of beaches, often perplexing the people who eventually find their massive bodies. The Coal Point Oil Reserve team thought that they'd found one such specimen too in 2019. Upon further inspection, though, the specialist realized that they'd actually come across something else, something just as enormous. It's not particularly surprising, however, that there would be such a creature on the Coal Point Oil Reserve in Southern California. After all, the area, which is protected by the University of California to aid in educational pursuits, is home to a slew of unusual fauna. The land itself is important too, as it's one of the final illustrations of a coastal strand environment. Untouched dunes pile up along the coastline of the Coal Oil Point Reserve, and these play host to some noteworthy forms of plant life. The ecosystems that have developed here are also delicately balanced, although they're certainly sufficient for the dune beetle and the western snowy plover, both of which can be seen near those sandy mounds. The Coal Oil Point Natural Reserve additionally encompasses the Devereaux Slough, which presents as a tidal lagoon during the colder parts of the year. In the summertime, though, most of the moisture evaporates and the area instead becomes defined by salt flats and saline ponds. And such changes create one-of-a-kind habitats for the creatures that end up here. There's also the case that the reserve's grasslands and its stretches covered in coastal scrub, a community of plants native to California. In total, the Coal Oil Point Reserve is known to host more than 1,000 different species of animals and plants. Yet experts believe that they've yet to reveal every single creature that dwells within the expanse of protected land. And it's fortunate the area is safeguarded too, as many of the examples of flora and fauna here face habitat disintegration elsewhere. Plus, the Coal Oil Point Reserve borders the Pacific Ocean, which means that there are plenty more noteworthy animals swimming in nearby depths. Indeed, an intern who worked on the reserve happened upon one of these very critters in February 2019. Far from away, though, the creature would have looked like a massive gray blob. And in a UC Santa Barbara press release, conservation specialist Jessica Nielsen was quoted as saying that the intern's discovery had initially shocked her. Unlike most other animals that appeared on sandy coastlines, you see, the creature had strange features. Of the find, Nielsen added, "This is certainly the most remarkable organism I've seen wash up on the beach in my 4 years at the reserve." In fact, it appears that the evolutionary biologist Thomas Turner felt much the same way when he saw the gigantic creature in the sand. First, he caught a glimpse of the beast in images that Nielsen had uploaded to the Coal Oil Point Reserve's Facebook account. Then he raced to the shoreline with his wife and child so that he could see the bizarre discovery for himself. Speaking to CNN in February 2019, Turner said, "It's the most unusual fish you've ever seen. It has no tail, all of its teeth are fused, so it doesn't have any teeth. It's just got this big round opening for a mouth. On top of that, the creature was enormous, in fact 6 foot tall. Turner stood with his arms outstretched to show just how large it was. The fish was nearly 7 feet long, as it happens, and weighed more than 600 pounds. Owing to all that they could determine then, the Coal Oil Point Reserve team classified the creature as an ocean sunfish, otherwise known as a common mola. The staff posted photos of the animal to a website called iNaturalist to allow other experts to weigh in. And at first, a number of commenters also suspected that the California-based team had found an ocean sunfish. Luckily though, someone looped Ralph Foster into the conversation. And from there, the South Australian Museum's fish expert took a good hard look at the photos of the supposed ocean sunfish. But not all was as it seemed. Yes, as Foster examined the creature, he suspected that it wasn't actually among the species identified at all. At least the skeptical Turner knew who he could turn to in search of answers. Ultimately then, he fired off an email containing some images of the beached fish to a woman named Marianne Nygaard. As a marine scientist, Nygaard was the perfect person to consult on such matters. But the images initially did little to move Nygaard. She recalled to CNN, "The pictures weren't very clear. I was reluctant to settle on an identification because it was so far out of range." So she and Foster reached out to the Coal Oil Point Reserve team. If they could send over better photos, then the duo could be in a better position to draw conclusions. Fortunately, Nielsen and Turner heeded Nygaard and Foster's call, and the California-based pair returned to the shoreline to snap more photos of the perplexing creature. By then, though, a couple of days had passed since the intern had spotted the blob on the sand. And in that time, the tides had seemingly washed it away. Still, Nielsen and Turner held out hope that they could track down the supposed ocean sunfish once more. They therefore separated out for a search, starting a couple of miles apart and then walking towards each other. And thankfully, the scientists' plan worked, as they finally rediscovered the fish's body not far from its original resting place. Turner and Nielsen could examine the creature once more then and send detailed photos to Nygaard and Foster. Yet, when the Coal Oil Point duo took a closer look at the fish, they noticed a few features that proved its original classification had been wrong. For example, where normal fish have tails, the ocean sunfish has what's known as a clavus, a rounded protrusion that's sometimes as wide as the entire body. As such, this feature acts more like a rudder than a powerful backfin. But while the beast on the California beach had a clavus, its shape didn't match that seen on other ocean sunfish. Snapping pictures of the unique fish delighted Nielsen though, and she explained as much to UC Santa Barbara news site The Current in February 2019. The conservation specialist said, "It really was exciting to collect the photos and samples, knowing that it could potentially be such an extraordinary sighting." And as it turned out, Nielsen hadn't let her excitement build up in vain. You see, as soon as Nygaard saw the clearer pictures, she knew that the California-based scientist had found something completely spectacular on their beach. Indeed, she later recounted to CNN, "I couldn't believe it, I nearly fell out of my chair." Specifically, Nygaard recognized that the sunfish was not of the common variety. Rather, it was a hoodwinker sunfish. And she was ultimately the right person to note the subtle differences between the two. After all, in 2012, the marine scientist had discovered and named the hoodwinker species after years of trying to find it. Plus, while scientists have long known about the existence of the sunfish, it's taken centuries for them to conclude that quite so many different varieties of the creature exist. The ocean sunfish, now known as the most prevalent of all sunfish species, was first discovered in 1758. Later, though, evidence started to emerge of a mysterious type of sunfish living around Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, or Chile. In other words, places that were all in the southern hemisphere. In addition, a record from the turn of the 19th century claimed that one of the massive creatures had been spotted in Dutch waters. Nygaard had plenty of places in which to look then, when she decided to try and find this enigmatic animal. But while Nygaard researched the mystery fish, she realized that a lot of sightings had been misclassified. Sometimes, for instance, a common variety of the fish was deemed to be a rarer breed or vice versa. And that's precisely how the hoodwinker had swum under the radar for so long. No one had taken the time to pinpoint its subtle diversity. Nygaard explained to CNN, "The hoodwinker had gone unnoticed because no one really realized it looked different. There's a long history of confusion about the species in the sunfish family. This fish had managed to stay out of sight and out of everyone's attention. It had been taken for mola mola, the ocean sunfish, so it was hoodwinking all of us." So when the California-based team found a hoodwinker on their shores, it floored Nygaard. Initially, you see, she had doubted claims that the species had somehow turned up in the US. Yet the pictures confirmed that yet another hoodwinker had actually surfaced, leaving Nygaard in what she described to The Guardian as a mix of disbelief and excitement. Much of that had to do with the hoodwinker's location, as California is a fair distance from the fish's usual haunts in the southern hemisphere. In March 2019, Nygaard added to The Guardian, "That's as far north as I've ever seen the hoodwinker. That corresponds to a cold water current. For this fish to suddenly rock up in California is really exciting." So how exactly did this specific hoodwinker end up over 4,000 miles away from its typical habitat? Well, Nygaard revealed to CNN that this type of exploratory behavior wasn't completely uncharacteristic for the hoodwinker. As she put it in her own words, it's not uncommon for sunfish to wander really far. And Nygaard shared another pair of hypotheses with The Guardian, explaining, "It could just be a lost sunfish, or it could be that we don't understand the distribution yet. Then, of course, there is the whole issue around climate change. We can't conclude anything from just one specimen, but of course, it's the question." Luckily, there's something that will potentially answer Nygaard's lingering questions: DNA. After the beach sunfish's discovery, scientists from UC Santa Barbara gathered around to take samples of its genetic information. And if a match is established between the Californian beast and a New Zealand hoodwinker, then this could prove that the Coal Oil Point Reserve example had somehow branched off from its southern hemisphere counterparts. Even if this turns out to be the case, though, there would still be other questions to answer. Nygaard explained further to CNN, saying, "We know the hoodwinker has the temperate distribution around here and off the coast of Chile, but then how did it cross the equator and turn up by you guys? It's intriguing what made the fish cross the equator." In the meantime, everyone involved with the discovery of the California hoodwinker was seemingly pleased to be part of such a momentous find. Nielsen told The Current, "Mola tecta, the hoodwinker, was just recently discovered, so there's still so much to learn about the species. I'm so glad that we could help these researchers make the final definitive ID." For fish scientist Foster, on the other hand, euphoria had kicked in long before the positive identification of the hoodwinker. As he explained on CNN, "To discover that it may be the first record in all of the Americas and only the second Northern Hemisphere record for the species, then I got very excited. Regardless, it will take time to determine if the California hoodwinker has ties to those in the Southern Hemisphere. And as it happens, a very interesting individual will carry out the DNA tests. Geneticist Dr. Mette Nygaard of Denmark's Aarhus University will lead the charge, and her surname may have given away the fact that she's Nygaard's sibling. For now, scientists can just appreciate the fact that people on the internet help them to identify an incredibly rare species. And the Coal Oil Point Reserve director, Chris Sandoval, certainly gave other credits when talking to The Current. He said, "Without attentive eyes, camera phones, and social media, the Australian ichthyologist would have never learned that this fish had just been seen for the first time in the Northern Hemisphere." Sandoval also implied that this method of sharing and spreading scientific theory would be a thing of the future. Right now, of course, it's still a relatively new concept. He explained, "This type of crowdsourced science is helping biologists map species in a way we could not have imagined just a few years ago." Nygaard and Turner celebrated the web for its aid in their triumph too. Nygaard, for instance, lauded iNaturalist for its bright and helpful community. She told CNN, "We're living in a changing world, and it's important for scientists to get input from everybody in what they see. We can't be out in the field every day all over the world." And then there was Turner, who was quick to point out that even he would have missed the hoodwinker without the assistance of the internet. He said, "I'm a professor, I'm a biologist, but I didn't actually know what was special about the fish. I just posted a picture, and that connected me with the world's expert and the discoverer of the species. Now he and the other specialists will have to wait and see what the tests say about the rare fish that brought them all together."